Oh, just quickly before I'll go up there, right? Am I supposed to go up there?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, it's good to be back. We love hanging out with you folks. We've been here several times, and I don't know what it is. We just connect. And I'm glad Stephanie kind of manipulated some things to get us back so we can harass you here. But Jewel and Evan Evans, that isn't a joke, Evan Evans, very Welsh. But we have been missionaries, or we're missionaries in West Africa, in the Ivory Coast, and then after that in Senegal for a total of 39 years. But now we're back in our Jerusalem. And anything else you want to add? Our family?
We have 4 grown daughters, 11 grandchildren, and there's no greater joy than knowing that your children are walking with the Lord, right? Yeah. So we're happy about that.
Anyway, it's good to be here. So she'll be popping up here and there. Like I said, last time we were here, our main focus was the uttermost parts, talking about Africa. But since we've kind of retired, we now are focusing on our Jerusalem. And so Stephanie asked if we could come and this time share about reaching our Jerusalem. And our Jerusalem now is Pensacola. In Acts 1:8, says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." It all started in Jerusalem. In fact, in Luke 24:47, Jesus tells his disciples that the repentance and forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, but it says, beginning from Jerusalem. Now, by the way, when it says here, you'll be my witnesses, the word witness is used here in Acts 1:8. It's the word martus, which we get the word what? Martyr. This is a message of the gospel, a message to die for. And many believers throughout the centuries have died for this message, the gospel. But I think it's even more important that we live for this message. We live it out. It should be the focus of our reaching out by living out the gospel. And so I'd like to take that a step further. And not only should we be living out the gospel, but I want to add one more word. Living the gospel with intentionality. With intentionality. I feel we miss out on so many opportunities because we're not intentional. So the title of my message, or our message this morning, is Living the Gospel with Intentionality, or the long version, Reaching Your Jerusalem by Living the Gospel with Intentionality. This message is going to be kind of a follow-up to our message that we gave about a year and a half ago on Ephesians 5:15, when we talked about making the most of every opportunity. For those that do not know us, we are more storytellers than preachers. So we are going to be telling stories. Now, you know, when missionaries start telling stories, how long it may go. But I'm going to try, for Helen's sake, to keep it under 56 minutes, Pastor. Okay, 56 minutes, we'll try to keep it under there. So, okay, you can start your stopwatch now, Helen, wherever you are. Where are you? In the kitchen? Oh, I think she's hearing. Are you hearing that? Anyway. But I hope as we share these stories that it's going to be an encouragement to you. That you'll leave this morning feeling encouraged, but you also leave being spurred on to reach your mission field here in Panama City and Lynn Haven. We all already heard a powerful testimony, okay, of the mission field. One of the mission fields right here. Thank you, Jenny. I think we could close and go home now. That was wonderful. But again, an opportunity there. So, reaching your Jerusalem, where does it start? Number 1, living the gospel in your family. Our Jerusalem starts closest to us, our family. This should be one of our biggest, if not the biggest focus, our family. If we have kids, we want to train them up in the way they should go, as Proverbs 22:6 says. Jill mentioned that all our daughters are following the Lord, and that is one of the biggest blessings. At an early age, they gave their hearts to Jesus. And we wanted them to grow up knowing that God is a personal God. It's a God who wants to commune with us. Not only does he forgive sins, but he loves us. He wants us to love him and love others. So some of the things we were intentional about as the kids were growing up was teaching them not only to have their personal devotions, but we also had family devotions. And during our family devotions, we wanted to focus on prayer, God's word, giving. One of the things we wanted to just kind of emphasize was how God answers prayer. And so we had this chest of remembrance. And we used it was taken from Joshua, I think, Joshua 4, 1 through 8. You remember when the children of Israel crossed the Jordan, and God did a miraculous sign, kind of parted the water. Joshua had the elders, or the leaders of each tribe come in with these big stones and pile them up. And so when they looked at that, it was a memorial of God's love and his miraculous deliverance. And so we didn't want to pile up a bunch of rocks in our living room. So we had this chest of remembrance, and what we would do is when we would pray for different needs, pray for people, we would write it, and then when God answered, we'd put it in this chest. Periodically, we would take that chest out, and we would read through some of those answers to prayer. When the girls were younger and they couldn't write, they would draw pictures of the answer to prayer. It was amazing, as we took those out time and time again, how many of those that we forgot. Miraculous answers to prayer. You know, I think Satan wants us to have like a spiritual dementia where we forget the goodness of God. And it was so encouraging for us to go back, bring out the chest. We'd kind of laugh at some of the drawings, but then we'd read them and say, remember when God answered that prayer? Put them back in the chest, and then we would add as it went along. But it was a great way to remember God's goodness and his answers to prayer. We wanted our girls to also experience the fun of generosity. The scripture says God loves a cheerful giver. So we not only wanted them to practice tithing and giving in the offerings, but as a family, we wanted to do some extra things. So we came up with this scheme that we would keep our eyes and our ears open to the people around us, to the community around us, and to see if there were any special needs. And if we saw something or heard something, we get together as a family, say, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Yes, they are really struggling. Well, let's give to them, and we'll write a note to encourage them. So we'd get together. We didn't want anybody to know, so we would get an envelope, put money in it, and then write a note just saying, we realize your need. We just want you to know that we're praying for you. And then we'd sign it, the Pillsbury Dough Boys. Dough. Then we'd get it to them without them knowing. But it was so fun because the girls would come back and say, I heard some people talking, and they said, wow, we were really struggling, and we got this note and this money from the Dough Boys, and it's exactly what we needed. And they would just kind of smile. And since we were a family of, like I said, all girls besides me, no one kind of was suspicious of us being the Doughboys. But it just made it fun. And to see how God was able to use us as we gave and as he used that, as he multiplied it. In fact, our oldest daughter was so excited about that she wanted to instill it in her family. And she's now ministering over in Korea. And they're doing the same thing where they're keeping their eyes open for people in need. And they write them a note, tell them they're praying for them. But over in Korea, the currency is the won. So they sign it, Don Juan. Fun stuff. Life with God can and should be an exciting adventure. And we thank God that all of our girls as Jules said, are in ministry or they're preparing for it. However, every child makes their own choices. And so I want Jewel to share another aspect of family.
We had many requests in that chest of remembrance, many prayer requests for my brother. I was raised in a Christian home. My dad is a retired Christian Missionary Alliance pastor. And I was raised with a brother and a sister. We're all close in age. But when my brother was 14 years old, there were older boys in the youth group at that church that thought it would be really funny to get the pastor's son skunk drunk. And so they took him out and, just got him drunk, and it was more than one time. And it didn't take long before my brother was actually addicted to alcohol while he was still in high school, and ran away from home when it was just 2 weeks before his graduation date. Wrote a note to my parents on a paper plate saying, "It's not you, it's the hypocrites in your church I can't stand, and I've had it, and I'm just going to go make my own way in the world. Please don't call the cops, don't send anyone to find me." And that brother of mine ran from the Lord for decades. The thing I want to tell you about, though, is that chest of remembrance. He had 4 little nieces and a sister and brother-in-law and my parents who were praying so specifically for him. And we didn't give up. And we prayed and prayed and prayed for him. And I remember one furlough when we were home in Pensacola, and he was back in that area for a period of time. But, our girls were used to praying for him as a family. And I remember inviting him over for a meal one night, and he was sitting at our table, and my daughter Amber was 5 years old at the time, and we asked her if she wanted to pray for the food, and she said yes. So she blessed the food and everything, but then in her sincere little heart, she just said, "And please, please, Jesus, show Uncle Buzz how he needs you." And, and he's sitting down at the end of the table, and I'm kind of peeking and he was just smiling down at the end of the table. And to this day, he credits his salvation story to 4 nieces who were praying for him so specifically and didn't give up on him. And so after decades of running from God and getting into trouble, he was not only an alcoholic, but he became a drug addict, and then he began selling drugs. And so he was in and out of jail and prison in 13 different states. Ended up coming to the end of himself while he was in prison, and came completely, totally to the end of himself, asked the guard to bring him a Bible, and being raised as the son of a pastor in church, he knew exactly where to look up all those verses on grace and mercy and forgiveness, and he got radically saved, where he started leading Bible studies in the prison and leading people to Christ. He worked in the library at the prison, and men would come in to check out a book, and he'd say, "Hey, come over here, sit down. I've got another book for you." And he'd open up his Bible and just share with them from the Bible. And he just was leading a lot of men to Christ. A few years ago, so an addict is like this, right? Up, down, up, down. And even though God had delivered him miraculously, he fell back into his sin again. And a few years ago, ended up getting picked up for selling meth. And he is currently sitting right here in Panama City in a jail, Bay County, if any of you know that jail, and is awaiting sentencing on that. But just came back to the Lord again, just so strongly. And he said, "Why is it I do better on the inside than on the outside? Like when I'm away from all my addictions when I'm on the inside." And so, his first night after they picked him up, first night in jail, he led a man to Christ. And this guy was getting out the next day on parole. And he sent word back to my brother. He looked for him before he got released that next day, and he said, just tell Greg that he saved my life last night by introducing me to Jesus, because I had a plan. When I got out on parole, I was going to take my life. I had the plan. I had the means to do it. And he introduced me to Jesus, and I have a reason to live now. And, share that with Greg. Let him know that he saved my life yesterday. Well, it was Jesus that saved his life. We all know that. But he calls me, pretty regularly from over here in Panama City. Whenever I see I've got a call coming in from I know I need to grab that and accept the call from the jail. He's awaiting, like I said, he's awaiting sentencing. But he was just sharing with me the other day that he led an MS-13 gang member to Christ the other day. And he said, you talk about a radical conversion. And so, it's ironic to think that his Jerusalem is a prison, is a jail, and will be the prison. But that's his Jerusalem. But I want to share that with you just to say, don't ever give up praying for your family members, because if the Lord can bring my brother, who was in and out of jail and prisons in 13 different states, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and radically save him like he has, he can do it for your prodigals too. So keep praying. God honors those prayers. He wanted me to also go on to the next point to talk about, that was our family. So our family is our first group that we, in our Jerusalem, right? But then we step outside of our doors, and who do we have? We have our neighbors, right? And we built a home in Pensacola in 1988, and we had neighbors who lived next door to us who he was a retired Navy man, rough around the edges, could swear like a sailor, and we tried to reach out to them and kind of be a witness to them, wanted to be salt and light, but they were cold and held us at an arm's length and everything. Well, then we had Hurricane Ivan hit, and their yard and ours were we live on a bay, and so they were just filled sky high with debris and a lot of damage to the lower portion of their house and everything. And so Evan was off speaking at a church when this happened, and when we woke up in the morning and just saw all the damage and everything, I thought, all right, we got to get out there and just start with the yard. But the Lord spoke to my heart and said, start with your neighbors. Go over there, take your girls over there with rakes and tell them that you're going to help them. And so we went over and knocked on the door, and all my girls had rakes, and we said, hey, what a storm, like we're just here. We just thought about all the cleanup and decided we'd come over here and help you with yours first. And they just said, why? Look at your yard, And I said, I know, but you're older than us, and I've got 4, able-bodied females that like to work hard, and actually it was God. God told us to come over and help you first. So they said, we have grown children who live right here in Pensacola, on the other side of Pensacola, who haven't even called us to check on us. And so, I'm telling you, the walls came down with this couple, and that began many, many years of a friendship that we have with them now, where we have been able to be Jesus in skin to them and talk to them about a personal relationship with Christ, and have just lived it out in front of them. And now that we're retired, that continues. So neighbors, the next one.
Okay, our Jerusalem, our family, our neighbors, and then living out the gospel, living the gospel at work. Now, most of the time, our work has been in ministry. But when we returned, after we returned from Africa for the last time, our house was hit by Sally. You folks know all about hurricanes, and Sally really did some major damages. And we couldn't find, it was like trying to find a contractor, a builder during a time after a hurricane. We couldn't find anybody. Fortunately, we had a friend of ours whose brother owned a construction company, a real strong believer, and a Mennonite background. Mennonites have a real background of good builders. And they said, we'll fit you in. And so they blessed us by coming over and doing renovations. Well, this company also used subcontractors. And what impressed me is that here, Daryl, the owner of the company, he's coming over and building. But after he would go, these subcontractors, you need sheet rockers, painters, and these subcontractors would come in, and we would hear them talking about Daryl, this Christian builder. And he had a powerful testimony. Some of these subcontractors were felons, former felons. And they had nothing but respect for this godly man. In fact, it was kind of funny. The painters at one point, I guess, got behind, and they said, okay, is that okay if we come next Sunday to finish up the painting? Don't tell Mr. Darrell. He doesn't like us working on Sunday. But he had that powerful influence. So living out the gospel at work, getting that opportunity to be Jesus in skin for those you work with. Then living out the gospel in our community, like Humble House. So we have been looking for now some areas that we can minister in our community, and we've applied to Sacred Heart Hospital and a crisis pregnancy center. At the hospital, they have all kinds of different opportunities where you can greet people. You can even, once they approve you, go and visit people, go room to room and ask if they need prayer. Jewel loves babies, so you can do a ministry where you go and hold the babies in the NICU. So there's all different opportunities there that we're looking forward to doing. And then we start next week training for this crisis pregnancy center. So looking for ways that we can touch the community. And it sounds like you have a great opportunity here to reach that community for Jesus, for the Humble House. Living out the gospel in the routine of life. Just in the everyday routine. I'm wearing a bracelet that is a testimony to this. For some of you that don't know, my parents were missionaries in Vietnam. We worked with the tribal group in the mountains called the Judea. And so I grew up knowing a number of these Judea believers that were just powerful men and women of God. And one of those men was an old man named Amatet. And Amatet loved Jesus, and he loved to share the gospel. Well, Dad was out in a village with some of the lay people and pastors, and they were ministering in the village, but then after it was over with, they needed to head into town. Well, especially the villagers way out in the jungle, if they could get kind of a ride into town, they thought, man, this is great, And so one man came up and said, is there room? Can I get a ride into town? And my dad said, well, there is room, but the cab is full. Would you want to ride in the flatbed in the back? He said, I don't care. I'll ride in the flatbed. And so he's getting ready to go back in the flatbed, and all of a sudden, old Amatet said, hey, I'll go back there and join him. So he gets back in the flatbed, and they're coming, again, on a jungle road, dust all over the place. And Dad said he'd be looking in the rearview mirror and could hardly see Amatet and this man are just covered with dust. They're just kind of huddled in the corner. At one point, the man wanted to get out. It was kind of came to his intersection there. And so he pounded on the cab. Dad pulled over. When he pulled over, Amatet came up. And he said all you could see was kind of the whites of his eyes and his smile. He was just full of dirt. And he said, oi. Oi is kind of a term of respect. It means grandfather. He says, oi, said to my dad, oi, this man wants to pray for salvation. The whole time they're back there, Amatet is sharing. Just traveling through the dust, he's sharing the gospel. And our people, the Judea, were animist, had a real fear of evil spirits. And so their lives were controlled by sacrifice. And, they'd be walking along the village and they'd stumble and fall. They'd go to the fetisher and he would say, oh, you got to sacrifice a chicken. And everything was sacrifice. Well, Matet was able to share this message of sacrifice, Jesus being the ultimate sacrifice. In fact, on their bracelets, they have sacrifice bracelets, and each little notch represents a sacrifice. This is a sacrifice bracelet. And the reason I wear it is a reminder of the power of the gospel, because it was automatic. As soon as that man prayed for salvation, he reached down and grabbed the bracelet, saying, now Jesus is my ultimate sacrifice. So this is the testimony of a man who stands before the throne right now, celebrating Jesus. Because Matet, in the routine of life of traveling down the road, took the time to share the gospel. Jill's going to share a little bit about how God is using us during the routine of life.
We came back a few years ago. I guess it's been 4 now. Can you believe it? 4 since COVID started. And we went from being in our sweet spot in ministry, where we were so fulfilled and seeing God do wonderful things, and had been there for 39 years. And then COVID hit, and Evan has AFib, and so the country that we were in Senegal, West Africa, didn't have good enough medical facilities for us to remain there. And so our mission organization said, why don't you go back to the States and wait it out, and once COVID passes and we get past this, and then you guys can come back. Well, none of us realized how long it would drag on and on and on before countries were open to letting you come back. And so it became apparent after like a year and a half, we weren't getting back. So our mission organization asked us if we wanted to just settle down in Pensacola and debrief missionary families with our organization. And so that's what we're doing right now, kind of part-time. So we retired early and are in the process of doing that kind of a ministry with. But it was such an adjustment for us, because we went from like being on the front lines where, we were seeing Senegalese come to Christ, and we were seeing whole villages come to Christ in our outreach ministries, and just feeling so fulfilled. And then all of a sudden we're sitting in Pensacola working on hurricane repairs, and day after day it was like the physical labor of cleanup and working on hurricane. And I mean, we slept on the floor for 9 months in our master bedroom while we were waiting for the rest of the house to be repaired, and before we could even order furniture or anything. And so I honestly got to a point where I felt kind of disillusioned. Like, is this all that's left for us now? This is life for us now, God? Like, this is it? And I just asked the Lord to just speak. And, one morning I just said, Lord, what do you have to say? Is this it for us? And I clearly heard the Spirit of God whisper to my heart 2 words: shadow ministry. And I thought, well, I know that's you, because I have no idea what a shadow ministry is, and you're going to have to explain this to me, because, and I went to Evan, have we heard something about a shadow ministry? Like, he said, a what? I said, I know, okay, so this is God, right? He told me, he whispered shadow ministry to me. He's going to have to explain what that means, because I was asking him, what's next, and is this all there is? And so the next day, after that happened, we ended up having to go over to the furniture store. I had gotten on a first-name basis with the owner of this mom-and-pop discount furniture store, because we had ordered a bedroom set for our bedroom, and the delivery had come a couple of times and they had gotten it wrong. It wasn't the right set. And so I had gotten on a first-name basis with Brenda, the owner of this company. And so the day after the Lord whispered shadow ministry to me, the furniture delivery truck pulls up in our driveway, and they start bringing in the bedroom set and setting it up. And I'm looking, and I'm saying, oh, you guys, I'm so sorry, but this is not the right set. You're going to have to take this back. And so I just took a picture of it, and I said to Evan, let's drive me over to the furniture store, and I'll just show Brenda the picture. I think if I just explain it to her in person, maybe they'll get this right. And so we went over to the furniture store, and I told Evan, just wait in the car, I'll be right back. I go running in. As for Brenda, they said she's back in her office. So I go back in her office, and I said, Brenda, I pulled my phone out of my back pocket, and I'm trying to find the picture, and she says, let me guess, Jewel, I botched your order again. And I said, well, it's still not the right set. I got the ones with, the drawers on the bottom. I thought if I could just show you. And all of a sudden I noticed across her desk, she's sitting behind her desk, that her eyes are filling up with tears. And so I just took my phone and put it back in my back pocket, and I said, Brenda, are you okay? And she said, no, Jewel, I'm not okay. I begged my daddy to sell this furniture store. He died and he left me with this furniture store. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't want this furniture store, and I'm messing up everything. And I've been working 14-hour days for the last 4 months since he died, and I haven't gotten a break. And just then, her assistant comes in from the side door and tries to hand her a cell phone and says, Mrs. So-and-so is on the phone, and she's irate. And Brenda just went like this, like, I can't deal with it. And so her assistant left. Then this door opened up behind me on this side, and this man walks in and he said, Brenda, we have 2 delivery trucks out in the parking lot full of furniture, and the warehouse is full. There's nowhere to put this furniture. What are we supposed to do? And she just looked at him and, like, get out. And so he left. And so she said, see? And I just said, it dawned on me. I just said, Brenda, I just realized something. My furniture snafu doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with you. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, God saw you sitting there behind your desk, going under. He sees you working these 14-hour days with no breaks, and he didn't mean for you to live this way. And he knew that if my furniture order got messed up again, I would just come in person. And now that I'm here, he knew that I would offer to pray for you. And I said, I just want you to know something. I said, I have his name tattooed on my wrist, El Roy. That means the God who sees. And he saw you sitting there. He saw you going under. And he sent me to pray for you. Can I pray for you? And she said, did you know my daddy was a preacher too? And I said, no, I don't know anything about your family. I just know God sent me to pray for you. And so she said yes. And so I went around to behind her, and she just turned her office chair towards me and just buried her head in my stomach. And so I'm praying for her. And I just prayed a simple prayer of, God, you saw Brenda. You sent me to pray for her because you don't mean for her to live this way, and you have a better life for her. And would you just help her to figure out some ways that she can build rest into her week, and that she can have, a joyous life. Reveal yourself to her, because you want to have a personal walk with her, reveal yourself to her that way. And so I don't know what all I prayed. I left, started walking out to the car, and the Spirit of God spoke to my heart and said, see, Jewel, that's your shadow ministry. And I thought, what do you mean? And he said, you're not going to be going back to Africa. You're not going to be on the front lines. You're not going to have the title of missionary anymore. But I'm going to bring people to you from the shadows in your everyday, mundane, routine life of working on hurricane repairs that need to know that there is a God in heaven who loves them and who sees them. And like Brenda. And so I got to the car. Evan said, what took so long? And I said, it's a long story, but God showed me what our shadow ministry is. The next day, Brenda calls me, and she said, okay, I think I've got the right bedroom set now. I'm sending the delivery guys over. But she said, that's not why I'm calling. And I said, oh. And she said, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. And she said, did he really see me? I said, yeah, he saw you. He saw you, and that's why he sent me to pray for you. And she said, because after you left, my day went so smoothly. We figured out where to get that furniture. We delivered a lot of other furniture so that we could make room in the warehouse for that furniture. And then I sat down when I got home last night and thought, I could simplify my life by doing this. And she said, I had never thought of those options before. Came into work today, and it's been so smooth. And she said, I just had to call you and say, was that him? Did he see me? And I said, yeah, he's giving you help in unusual ways like we prayed, right? So that's our routine, mundane lives. You go to Walmart. You see somebody at Walmart, keep your eyes open. Every day, Evan and I pray together in our devotional time and just say, God, just open our eyes today as we're out running errands. If we see someone at Walmart that just needs someone to come up and say, can I pray for you? Or I see a struggling mom and a lot of children and, pay for somebody's groceries or just open our eyes, just highlight people, put a green light on people who need to know that there is a God, El Roy, who sees them and loves them.
Reaching our Jerusalem, living the gospel, family, neighbors, work, community, in the everyday routine. And finally, living out the gospel in and through our church family. Mission started with Jerusalem, but it started with a really healthy church. And it's important that we have a healthy church. Each of us contribute to the health of our church. Some of you, we were talking with the missions committee, and they were talking about doing a study in Acts. But let me just read Acts 2, talking about the early church. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And then it goes back into 46. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And it said this, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. One thing I love about this church is you love to eat. You love to celebrate. You love to fellowship. You love getting together and fellowship. So important that we invest in our church and in the lives of our fellow believers. And we need each other. We are part of the body of Christ with different gifts, with different talents, with different interests, with different abilities, with different experiences. But we all need to be involved. First of all, in the church itself. And there's all kinds of things, and I know there's whether it's working with the youth, whether it is working on the soundboard, whether it is greeting, whether it is practicing hospitality. I thank the Lord for Joseph and Connie that put up with us one more time. Practicing hospitality, a lot of scripture verses on hospitality. Teaching, all kinds of ways that we can invest ourselves in the church. After I got out of college, I was attending a church in New York, and it's a fairly big church, had a great pastor and all. But as I look back, you know what I remember about that church that probably blessed me the most? The ushers. The ushers. I just remember coming into that church, and right away, these ushers would come out. They know what I was going through. They know all kinds of stuff. There was just that warmth. And I think there were a lot of people that returned to that church because of the ushers. So all of us have a part of keeping our church healthy, and then also from there helping the church in reaching out. One of the things that we have seen in things, about a healthy church and the healthy body of believers. I shared last time we were here about Amir, a Jewish student that came to our Christian school and really was not a believer, and he would argue with people, and he was brilliant, and all of a sudden, one time, he just stood up and said, I want to give my heart to Jesus Christ. We're thinking, what? It was after a service, so I went over to him and said, Amir, what happened? What did the preacher say? You know what he said? He said, it really wasn't what he said. That was kind of icing on the cake. He said, what really has done it? He said, I've been watching now for 2 years, watching you believers, you Christians, how you interact with each other. And he said, it drew me to Jesus. When we were in Senegal, there was quite a few missionaries in the one community, and in the community there with lots of Senegalese also. And I remember we had this veggie guy that would come selling vegetables door to door. And he sat down with one of our missionaries, and they were talking, and he said, you know what? I just want to say something to you. He said, at night, we sit out in front of this little stand, little what do you call it? A magazine. What? Little convenience store, yes, you could call it that. A little convenience store. And he said, all the men get together and we drink, remember the Arabic tea, those of you at Arabic tea, we drink this Arabic tea called Ataya. We drink it, and we solve the problems of the world. We discuss everything, and we solve the problems of the world. And he said, we talk about you guys. We talk about you missionaries and you living in the community with us. And you know what we've decided? We're Muslims, but you know what we decided? And she said, what? Said, we've watched you as you interact with each other. We've watched you as you interact with us, and we are convinced you have the truth. By this, all men will know that you're disciples, my disciples, if you love one another. Just a healthy church ministers and is a way of reaching your Jerusalem. So don't ever underestimate God, what he can do through you. He has placed you here with different experiences, interests, gifts, opportunities, abilities, relationships that are unique to you here in your Jerusalem. So live the gospel with intentionality. And as Hebrews 10:24-25 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds.